Have you ever wondered what it takes to build a life, not for yourself, but for someone else? A life filled with sacrifice, a life built on the quiet promise that you will give everything for those you love? Tom Evans was a man of few words, a man who worked tirelessly day after day, never expecting anything in return except the happiness and well-being of his twin daughters. He wasn't rich. He didn't have grand achievements to boast about. What Tom had was a heart that was filled with an unwavering commitment to his family. His wife, Emily, passed away while giving birth to their twin girls. With that loss came the end of his dreams, but the beginning of something much greater. The death of Emily left a hole in Tom's heart that he could never quite fill. Yet, as he gazed at the two tiny faces in the crib, something within him shifted. His old dreams of becoming a successful carpenter and opening his own business, now seemed insignificant. In that moment, he understood his new purpose. He was now the sole parent of Emily Jr. and Ella, and everything he had, everything he could give, would go into raising them. For years, Tom worked in the same small town, taking up odd jobs as a mechanic, a handyman, and even a gardener to support his daughters. He never complained, never asked for help. He did it all with his own hands, his sweat, and often in silence. The world around him had no idea of the sacrifices he was making. He was just another man struggling to make ends meet. But the reality was far from simple. Each day, Tom juggled the harshness of labor with the responsibility of parenting two young children. As they grew older, Emily Jr. and Ella often had to forego the luxuries that other children enjoyed. There were no family vacations, no new toys, no brand new clothes, but there was always love, and there was always food on the table. Tom may have had to forego his happiness, but his daughters never felt deprived in the emotional sense. They knew that their father loved them more than anything in the world, and that love became their strength. Tom never spoke about the pain of losing his wife. He never spoke about the dreams he had let go, but Emily Jr. and Ella saw the sacrifices. They saw the weary look in his eyes after long shifts, the constant worry about making ends meet. And even as young girls, they knew that they were the reason he gave up everything. But there were moments, fleeting ones, when Tom would catch a glimpse of the man he could have been. He would walk by a workshop, his hands itching to touch the wood, to build something from scratch. But then he would remember his daughters, sleeping in their beds, and he would pull his thoughts away, back to the life he had chosen. As Emily Jr. and Ella reached their teenage years, they began to realize just how much their father had sacrificed. At school, they listened as their friends spoke about their parents' vacations, their new cars, and their summer houses. They saw the envy in the eyes of their classmates when they arrived in their old, worn-out car, and they heard the whispers of people who didn't understand why their father worked so much but never seemed to enjoy anything. It was in these moments that Emily Jr. and Ella began to understand the weight of their father's sacrifices. They didn't want to dwell on it, though. What mattered more to them was that their father had always been there. Even when he was exhausted, even when he had nothing left to give, he was there, and for that, they were eternally grateful. One evening, after a long day of school, Emily Jr. sat down with her father in the kitchen. Tom was just finishing dinner when she spoke. "Dad," Emily Jr. said, looking up from her plate, "do you ever regret it?" Tom, who had been stirring the pot, paused for a moment. "Regret what, sweetheart? Do you ever regret giving up your dreams for us?" she asked quietly. Tom set the spoon down and turned to face his daughter. His face was lined with years of hard work, but there was a softness in his eyes that only a father could have. "I didn't give up anything," he said, his voice steady. "Everything I did, everything I gave, was for you two. If I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't change a thing." Emily Jr. looked at her father, her heart heavy with emotion. She wanted to say more, to express how much they appreciated him, but the words didn't come. Instead, She simply nodded and smiled, knowing that her father's love was the greatest gift she could ever receive. The years went by, and with each passing day, the twins grew stronger, more independent, and increasingly aware of the silent strength their father had given them. Tom had always been a man of action, not words. He didn't need to say much. His love and sacrifice were evident in every decision he made. Every hour he worked, every moment he spent in the quiet company of his daughters. As they entered high school, Emily Jr. and Ella became aware of the subtle differences in their lives compared to their classmates. They didn't go on weekend trips to the beach. Their clothes weren't the latest fashion, and their meals often consisted of simple, home-cooked dishes, unlike the takeout that seemed to flood the homes of other children. Still, none of this bothered them. They had grown up knowing that these were the sacrifices their father had made for them. His sacrifices weren't just about money or material things. They were about time, effort, and undying devotion. Despite their father's hard work and the stability he provided, the twins were not immune to the feeling of being different. They had always been proud of their father, but there were times when they longed for the kind of life their friends seemed to have. They would hear stories about vacations to exotic places or nights spent in fancy restaurants, and they couldn't help but feel the sting of not having those experiences. But then, they would remember what their father had given up: his happiness, his dreams, his time, all for them. One day, Emily Jr. came home from school visibly upset. Her friend, Jennifer, had invited her to a weekend getaway at her family's beach house. And as they talked, Emily Jr. realized just how different her life was from Jennifer's. While Jennifer's parents took vacations regularly and treated her to the latest gadgets, Emily Jr. had never known anything like that. Her family's idea of a special treat was a home-cooked meal and a trip to the local park. Sitting down with Tom that evening, Emily Jr. finally voiced what had been brewing in her heart. "Dad," she began quietly, "do you ever wish we had more? You know, like other kids?" Tom paused, his weathered hands resting on the table. He had known this conversation was coming, but he was never quite sure how to address it. His daughters had always accepted their modest life without complaint, but he could see now that they were growing older and starting to question things. "Sweetheart, I know you're feeling this way, and I get it," Tom said gently, his voice filled with a tenderness that only a father could have. "But I want you to understand something important. The things that matter most: love, family, honesty, hard work, those are the things that last. You and Ella, you're rich in those things. And that's something no one can take away from you. Don't let the world's idea of wealth confuse you. You have everything you need to succeed, to be happy." Emily Jr. looked up at her father, her eyes filled with admiration. She hadn't expected him to say that. She had expected him to apologize for not being able to give them more. But instead, he had reaffirmed the very lessons he had been teaching them all their lives. They didn't need extravagant vacations or expensive clothes. They had each other, and that was enough. Ella, who had been quietly listening from the doorway, walked into the kitchen and sat down beside her sister. "He's right. You know," Ella said softly, "we don't need any of that to be happy. Look at everything we've learned. Look at the family we have." Tom smiled, the weight of his years suddenly lifting. He had always hoped that his daughters would understand the true meaning of wealth, that it wasn't measured in money or material goods, but in love, respect, and integrity. It was moments like this that made every sacrifice he had made worthwhile. As they sat together in the kitchen, the evening light casting a warm glow over the room, Emily Jr. and Ella realized something profound. They didn't need the things that their friends had. They had something far more valuable: each other, and the man who had given up everything to give them a future. When Emily Jr. and Ella graduated from high school, they both decided to pursue careers that would allow them to give back to the world in meaningful ways. Emily Jr. dreamed of becoming a lawyer, driven by a deep sense of justice and the desire to protect those who had been forgotten by society. Ella with her quiet intelligence, wanted to study engineering, fascinated by the idea of designing sustainable solutions that could help improve the environment. Tom was thrilled. Of course, he had always been supportive of their ambitions, even though he had never been able to give them the resources they needed. But when the reality of college expenses hit, Tom found himself at a crossroads. The money he had saved was not enough to cover both of their tuition fees, and taking out loans seemed like an impossible burden. One evening, after a particularly difficult day, Tom sat in his old recliner, looking over the bills that had piled up. His heart sank as he realized he didn't have enough. He could see it in their eyes, their hopes and dreams for the future. But how could he provide for them when the odds were stacked so high? The following day, Emily Jr. and Ella sat down with Tom to discuss their options. They had seen the strain on his face, and they knew how hard he had worked to get them this far. "Dad," Emily Jr. said, her voice steady, "we'll figure something out. We can get scholarships. We can work part-time jobs. We don't need to put everything on you." But Tom shook his head. "I'm sorry, girls," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I promised your mother I would give you the best life I could, but now I don't know how to do that." Ella, always the more reserved of the two, placed her hand on her father's arm. "You've already done more than enough, more than we could ever ask for." Emily Jr. nodded. "We'll make it work. We always have." And so, with determination in their hearts, the twins began their journey toward higher education. They applied for every scholarship they could find, worked part-time jobs, and did everything in their power to make their dreams a reality. It wasn't easy. There were many sleepless nights, long hours, and moments of doubt, but through it all, they held on to the lessons their father had taught them. Never give up. Never stop working for what you believe in. As Emily Jr. and Ella ventured deeper into their studies, the reality of adult life began to weigh heavily on them. They had always been strong, capable, and driven, but nothing could have prepared them for the immense pressure that came with balancing school, work, and a dream of a better future. Emily Jr., now in law school, found herself constantly battling exhaustion. Her days were filled with classes, study groups, and countless hours spent reading through textbooks and legal cases. At night, she worked part-time at a local coffee shop to help pay for textbooks and living expenses. Ella, on the other hand, juggled her engineering courses with a part-time job at a construction company, learning the ropes of the trade to one day design sustainable, eco-friendly buildings. It was a grueling routine, and there were days when both of them wanted to give up. But no matter how hard it got, they always remembered their father's sacrifice. Every time they felt like they couldn't push any further, they thought of Tom, how he had worked tirelessly to give them the opportunities they now had. It was a constant reminder that giving up was never an option. One evening, as Emily Jr. sat at her desk, surrounded by papers, she received a call from Tom. His voice, though warm and comforting as always, had an edge of concern that caught her attention. "Em, I wanted to check in on you," Tom said. "How's everything going? You sound a little tired." She smiled softly into the phone. "It's just the usual. Dad, classes, work. You know how it is. But I'm okay, really. I know you're working hard. Sweetheart, just don't overdo it. You've got your whole life ahead of you." Emily Jr. paused, her thoughts momentarily drifting back to the late nights she had spent studying and the constant fear of not being good enough. "I'm doing my best, Dad. I just wish I could do more for you. You've given up so much already. I want to make sure it was worth it." Tom's voice softened, and she could hear the faintest chuckle in his words. "I never gave up anything. Em, I did what I had to do to give you two the best life possible, and you've already made it worth it. Look at you. You're already accomplishing more than I ever could have dreamed." Emily Jr., his heart swelled with emotion. "We're doing this for you, Dad. Everything we do, Everything we achieve, it's all because of you." Tom fell silent for a moment before he spoke again, his voice steady. "Well, you're making me proud. Just remember, you don't have to carry everything on your own. I've always got your back, no matter what." Hearing those words was like a balm to Emily Jr. It's a weary soul. She hung up the phone that night with renewed determination. She couldn't let her father's sacrifices go to waste. She would finish law school. She would succeed. And most importantly, she would find a way to honor him. As the years passed, both girls began to see their hard work paying off. Emily Jr. graduated from law school with honors, and after passing the bar exam, she quickly secured a job at a prestigious law firm. Ella, meanwhile, completed her engineering degree with a specialization in sustainable energy and was offered a position with an innovative firm that focused on eco-friendly building solutions. They had made it, but their success didn't come without cost. Both of them had sacrificed so much: personal time, relationships, and countless hours of rest. They had pushed themselves to their limits, driven by the desire to repay their father for all he had given them, and yet, something was missing. Despite their professional success, they both felt like they were losing the connection they once had with their father. They hadn't realized how much they had neglected him in their pursuit of their dreams. One weekend, when the twins were both back home for a short visit, Tom invited them to dinner. The evening was calm, peaceful, and the house smelled of Tom's famous roast chicken. It felt like a moment of quiet perfection, something they hadn't experienced in a long time. Sitting down at the dinner table, Emily Jr. and Ella exchanged glances. They had both been so caught up in their individual lives that they hadn't truly spent time with their father. They hadn't asked about his days, his struggles, or his happiness. "Dad," Ella said softly, breaking the silence, "how have you been? We've been so busy with our stuff lately. We haven't asked how you're doing." Tom looked up from his plate, his smile warm but his eyes betraying a hint of sadness. "I'm fine. Girls, just getting older. You know, things slow down a bit, but I'm good." But they could see it. His shoulders were heavier than they remembered. His face had more lines than before. Tom had always been strong, but now, in his silence, they understood that perhaps he had carried more than he should have. "I've been thinking," Emily Jr. began, her voice tinged with regret, "about everything you've done for us. We've been so focused on our success that we didn't stop to ask how you were. You've spent your life working for us, and we haven't been there for you." Ella nodded. "We've been so wrapped up in our careers, but we should have made more time for you. We want to make things right." "Dad." Tom's eyes softened as he reached for their hands across the table. "Girls, there's nothing to make right. You've both done more than I ever could have imagined. You've become strong, capable women who are going to do amazing things in this world. That's all I ever wanted for you. But we want to give something back to you," Emily Jr. said, determination in her voice. "We want to create something for you, a legacy, just like you did for us." Tom shook his head, his smile widening. "What I gave you was more than enough. You're my legacy, and nothing makes me prouder than seeing you both succeed." But Emily Jr. and Ella knew that their father's words weren't enough. They needed to do something to show him how much he meant to them. They needed to create something lasting, something that would honor the sacrifices he had made for them. And they vowed to do it together, Emily Jr. and Ella spent the next few months putting their plans into action. They knew that their father had always dreamed of having his own woodworking business, a place where he could create beautiful pieces from scratch, just like he had done as a young man. But the dream had been put on hold when he chose to raise them. Together, they decided to leap. Emily Jr. would use her legal expertise to set up the business structure and handle the legal side, while Ella would take charge of the operations and design. They found a small, abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, and with the little savings they had, they transformed it into a workshop, a place where Tom's legacy could finally come to life. The process wasn't easy. They faced setbacks and challenges along the way. Funding was tight, and the physical labor was grueling. But each night, when they went home, they knew they were doing something for Tom that could never be measured in money or success. They were creating a business that would stand as a testament to the sacrifices their father had made. Finally, after months of hard work, the woodworking shop was ready to open. They invited Tom to the grand opening, and as he walked through the doors, he was overcome with emotion. The shop was filled with handcrafted furniture, all made from the finest materials, and each piece held a story, stories of love, sacrifice, and dedication. This is for you, Dad, Emily Jr. said, her voice filled with pride. This is everything we've worked for, everything you taught us. Tom looked around, his eyes glistening with tears. I never expected this, but I've always known you two were capable of greatness. The opening of the shop marked a new chapter in their lives, a chapter where they finally gave something back to the man who had given everything for them. And, as the first customers walked through the door, Tom knew that his legacy would continue, not just in the business, but in the love and gratitude that would live on for generations. The grand opening of the woodworking shop was more than just a business launch. It marked the beginning of a new legacy. The small, humble workshop quickly grew in reputation, known for the meticulous craftsmanship of its furniture and the story it told. The pieces were more than just furniture. They were symbols of love, sacrifice, and the passing of wisdom through generations. Tom had always believed that the hands that created something were just as important as the materials that made it. As the business grew, the shop became a place where skilled craftsmen came to work, many of them underprivileged or struggling to make a living elsewhere. Emily Jr. and Ella knew their father's heart, and they wanted to create not just a business, but a community, a place where people could find purpose and pride in their work. Word of the shop's mission spread quickly, and soon, local artisans were seeking work at Tom's shop. The walls of the workshop were filled with the hum of saws and hammers, and in every corner, there were conversations about sustainability, craftsmanship, and the value of hard work. People came from all walks of life, some to buy the furniture, others to work and learn from the best. It wasn't long before the workshop had become a symbol of hope and resilience for many who had given up on their dreams. But for Emily Jr. and Ella, the most rewarding part wasn't the growing sales or recognition. It was the stories they heard from the people whose lives had been touched by Tom's legacy. Many of the workers had stories of their own, stories of struggle and sacrifice, but also of dreams that had been reignited. Some had left jobs that drained them emotionally, while others had just returned to their craft after years of neglect. In the woodworking shop, they had found a family, a purpose, and the chance to rebuild their lives. As the business flourished, Emily Jr. and Ella began looking for ways to expand their father's legacy even further. They realized that the true impact of Tom's sacrifices had rippled outward, beyond their family, beyond the business, and into the community. They decided to start a foundation that would support single parents and low-income families. Just like the one Tom had worked so hard to provide for, the Tom Evans Foundation was born, dedicated to providing scholarships for children of single parents, offering grants to small businesses, and funding vocational training programs. The foundation quickly became a beacon of hope for those who needed it most. The values of hard work, perseverance, and selflessness that Tom had instilled in his daughters were now being passed on to others. One day, as Emily Jr. and Ella were sitting in the foundation's office, finalizing plans for their next community initiative, Tom walked in. He had been out on a delivery run. As he still enjoyed helping with the hands-on aspects of the business, when he saw the foundation's work, he was overcome with emotion. I never imagined it would come to this, Tom said, his voice choked with pride. I've spent my life working for you girls, but now you're changing the world. I could never have asked for anything more. Emily Jr. smiled and placed a hand on her father's shoulder. We're not changing the world. Dad, you did. We're just carrying your legacy forward. Tom shook his head, his eyes glistening with tears. You've given me more than I could have ever hoped for. And in that moment, Emily Jr. and Ella knew that their father's sacrifice was not just for them, it was for the entire community. It was a ripple that would continue for generations to come. As the years passed, Tom began to slow down, his age starting to catch up with him. But even as his body grew frail, his spirit remained as strong as ever. He continued to come into the shop every day, sharing his wisdom with the younger generation of artisans. But he knew that the time was coming for him to step back completely. Emily Jr. and Ella, now well established in their careers and their roles as leaders of the business, knew it was time to carry the mantle. The foundation, which had grown significantly over the years, was now a force to be reckoned with in their community. The twins were proud of what they had accomplished, but they knew it was only the beginning. They had built the legacy their father had given them. But they weren't done yet. The workshop had now become a hub for innovation, and they were committed to using it to further their mission of sustainability and community support. They started a new initiative called Crafting Futures, a program that offered internships and apprenticeships for young people, especially those from underprivileged backgrounds, to learn the trade and gain the skills necessary to succeed in the workforce. As part of this initiative, they partnered with local schools and community centers to provide woodworking classes and mentorship. They wanted to give back in the same way their father had given them a foundation for success. It was their turn to pass on the knowledge, the love, and the sacrifice that Tom had instilled in them. One autumn afternoon, as the Crafting Futures program kicked off, Emily Jr. and Ella sat together in the workshop, watching the new batch of apprentices as they worked diligently. Their father, now in his late 70s, was sitting at his usual spot by the window, smiling as he watched the young people shaping wood with the same care and precision he had taught his daughters all those years ago. "It's happening, isn't it?" Emily Jr. said quietly, her voice filled with pride. Ella nodded, her eyes soft with emotion. "Everything we dreamed of, it's all coming true." They sat in silence for a moment, taking in the sight before them. The next generation of artisans, learning the trade that had changed their lives, and in that moment, they realized that their father's legacy would live on, not just through the business, but through the lives they touched and the futures they shaped. Tom Evans, now an elderly man with silver hair and a weathered face, watched as his granddaughters played in the yard outside the workshop. His heart was full as he realized that the sacrifices he had made all those years ago had not only given his daughters a better life, but had built something much greater, a legacy that would live on for generations. He had never expected to have grandchildren, and yet here they were, two young girls running and laughing in the yard. They were the next generation of Evans women, and Tom knew they would carry on the values that had been passed down to them, the values of love, sacrifice, hard work, and family. The business had grown beyond anything he could have imagined. It wasn't just about the furniture anymore. It was about the people, the community, and the foundation they had built together. Tom had given everything for his daughters, and now they were giving everything back, creating something that would stand the test of time. As Tom sat back in his chair, surrounded by the legacy he had built and the family he had nurtured, he finally allowed himself to rest. He had done his part. Now, it was their turn to carry it forward. And as he looked at his daughters, his grandchildren, and the people who had been touched by his life's work, he realized that the true measure of a man wasn't in what he had achieved. It was in the love he gave, the people he inspired, and the legacy he left behind. And Tom Evans knew, without a doubt, that he had built a legacy that would live on for generations to come. As the sun sets on Tom Evans' remarkable journey, his legacy continues to shine brightly through the lives of his daughters, their business, and the many individuals whose lives were touched by his sacrifices, from humble beginnings to building a thriving business and foundation. Tom's unwavering love, hard work, and selflessness created a ripple effect that will last for generations. This is a story not only of family, but of resilience, determination, and the power of giving everything for those you love. Tom may have given up his own dreams, but in return, his daughters built a legacy that honors his sacrifice and continues to inspire others to this day. And as the next generation carries the torch forward, his legacy will remain alive, shaping lives and creating opportunities for many more to come.